It is now my honor to introduce the wonderful Edith Yoder.
Hoping I can do this. We'll see if it squeaks at me or not. All right. Well, it is so wonderful to see all your faces here. And I know many of us only get to see each other in person once a year. So thank you for being here. And I am hoping to share just some few comments to get us started this afternoon. Oh, wow, how the day has gone already. And I want to invite us into thinking about making space amidst or among the ruins. So, we'll see if this works. What are the ruins around us today, in these days? Over 35 years ago, a pastor in a small city in Pennsylvania used a sermon series on the book of Nehemiah to call his congregation to face the ruins all around them and then make space out of the ruins for those who were alone and homeless. The outcomes of facing the ruins in the 1980s, Bridge of Hope. So, this Old Testament story of Nehemiah is a foundational story for Bridge of Hope. Our history as an organization is rooted in this sermon from Nehemiah 2. So every organization needs to know its founding story, right? So I thought this would perhaps be the time to remember or re-share one of our founding stories. This little book of Nehemiah is not very famous, and it's not a story often told because it's really not a happily ever after story. If you read the whole book of Nehemiah, you might get a little depressed. But many of the Hebrew scripture stories are not happily ever after stories. So, in short, Nehemiah is an exile from the city of Jerusalem, now living in Babylon, and is serving on the Persian court. He is very concerned about the ruins of his hometown, Jerusalem, and he has a vision for rebuilding the walls. He petitions the king, and the king sends him off to Jerusalem with resources and armed guards. Nehemiah's journey is not an easy one, but he continues to hold out this vision of rebuilding the ruined walls and invites the people of Jerusalem to join him. He casts a vision, and the people commit to the common good and say, let's start building. In Pastor Andy's sermon, he opened with two questions. What is it like to face ruins? Have you seen those pictures every once in a while of men, women, and children sorting through the wreckage of their homes after a tornado has gone through or a bomb has fallen? And then he went on to ask, what does it do to people to face ruins like that? For some people, looking at ruins means the end of hope, the beginning of despair, the start of bitterness. For others, something dies when they see the ruins of something precious for them. Maybe it is the death of a hope, a dream, a goal, a love. But for others, seeing the ruins gives them a new vision of the place of God or the presence of God, and they suddenly see a picture of a new work God will do. What makes a difference? He asked. So in 1986, this is a long time ago, when Pastor Andy preached this sermon, what were the ruins around his church? So the ruins in this community of Coatesville, Pennsylvania, included seeing moms and children who were homeless in numbers that had not been seen before in that small city or in the history of the US. Now, Andy was a master's level social worker, and he had international development experience before becoming a pastor. And he had personally experienced significant ruins in his own life. He knew pain and suffering. And he knew, looking at his congregation in that moment, that it was time to respond with a new vision for the times. Now, I want to just make sure we have the context right here. So if you don't know your history of homelessness in the United States, let's think about what was happening in the mid-1980s. So in the mid-1980s, we were seeing an increase in homelessness because of two primary factors: the economy and the deinstitutionalization of those with mental illness. So those two pieces combined in that time frame. And in Pastor Andy's church, which was a very socioeconomically diverse church, the congregants were both experiencing that homelessness in their own lives or in the lives of their family members, but also seeing it around them in staggering numbers. So that sermon was the launch pad of what is today Bridge of Hope, 37 years ago. After that sermon, Bridge of Hope co-founder Linda Whitmer stood up and shared a vision that she and a group of others had from several local churches for rebuilding lives, walking with women and children facing homelessness and facing the ruin and devastation around them. Some of those women were attending Pastor Andy's church and were living in a new local women's shelter in Coatesville. I happen to remember that day. I was home on spring break from college and was listening to that sermon and that vision shared for a new work with homeless women and children. So what are the ruins that we are facing today? In your work, what are the ruins? In the wake of this global pandemic and economic uncertainties, rental housing costs are outpacing the ability of most of our families paying for that rent. We are seeing a nationwide affordable housing crisis that we have not seen in the past, and we are seeing an escalation in calls for help. Families on the edge of homelessness have not felt this level of pressure in over a generation. So what do these ruins look like? It looks like the countless stories that you hear every day when you are picking up the phone at your Bridge of Hope location. My two children and I can't afford to stay in our house because our landlord just increased the rent by $300 a month. Can you help? I'm at the domestic violence shelter and need housing, but there's nothing I can afford. Can you help? I'm looking for an apartment, and today when I went, there's 47 other people looking at that same place. I can't seem to get anywhere. Can you help? So here's some trends that we are experiencing as a network. I'm going to show you a lot of data just in a 3-minute little snippet here. So if you don't like data, I apologize for these next 3 minutes, but I think often this can validate what we're experiencing in terms of the ruins that we are facing every day. There has been a dramatic increase in calls for help that we are tracking through Outcomes Tracker. And many of you are experiencing this in your own location. In the Bridge of Hope Network, in the past 3 years, we have experienced a striking 284% increase in calls for help. You have done amazing work. Over the past 4 years, you have served combined an increase in 90% more families served. And that is truly inspiring. Thank you for the work you do. And yet I know many of you also carry the weight of this other number of 284% increase in calls for help. With increased levels of calls for help, we have gone from being able to serve 11% of those who call for help to serving 2% of those who call for help. So if you wonder sometimes, why do I feel discouraged? Perhaps some of the numbers can help us understand some of that. The 3 locations with the biggest jumps in calls for help are continuing to respond to an ever increasing number of calls for help. Homelessness is a piling on of obstacles, a piling on. So we are seeing families with higher barriers, more mental health challenges, and children with additional needs than we have seen in the past. Average days to house has continued to be above the 60-day maximum benchmark for the past 2 years. Some of you are in communities where you are facing over 100 days of days to housing on average. That too can feel discouraging. Bridge of Hope families have seen a 59% increase in average rental assistance, average rent paid per month. So going from 4 years ago, an average of $804 a month rent to over $1,200. And the final number is a 58% increase in rental assistance provided per family in your Bridge of Hope locations. So for those of you, perhaps you're not doing direct service, perhaps you're doing the fundraising to try to keep up with these numbers. And that too can feel overwhelming at times as you go from providing rental assistance of just under $6,000 to now almost $10,000 per family. This is a lot of information, and it represents a lot of the ruins around us that our communities are experiencing. So what is the vision? Nehemiah calls us to a vision, right? What is the vision for rebuilding the ruins around us today? Addressing family homelessness in this moment and in new ways. What is the vision? At Bridge of Hope, our 3-year strategic plan of making space is the vision that we invite each of your locations to embrace so that together we can have a bigger impact. This strategic vision includes 3 things, 3 strategies. First, a multi-pronged approach to affordable housing. So this is obviously deepening what we already know really works, right? So deepening those landlord partnerships. But it also means maybe we can try new things, see what else might work. Trying things like property ownership, master leasing, lease guarantors, partnerships with housing nonprofits in our communities, and more. The second strategy there is a comprehensive approach to mental health and whole family support. We are calling this strengthening the scaffolding of support and hoping that all neighborhoods of support are strengthened. This includes engaging additional neighboring volunteers. And the third is creating brave spaces in the midst of complex trauma to deepen our cultural humility, to serve 50% more families, to add 6 Bridge of Hope locations, and then to raise funds to make all that happen. And we invite you to join in this vision. It is an audacious goal to think we can now, after increasing family served by 90% over the past couple of years, now we can turn around and work to increase family served by an additional 50%. It's a big one. But we also know that to not respond to the increased needs is just as painful. And so we invite you, in the midst of this housing crisis, let's all lean in. Let's think about how we might indeed make an impact on this vision. I do want to make sure that I share words of encouragement with you, because the work is challenging and the needs continue to grow. So my encouragement, three things to encourage you in your work as we make space for families who have experienced the ruins of affordable housing options, the ruins of inflation, the ruins of daycare closures, the ruins of cars that are lived in instead of just used as transportation. As you walk with families facing homelessness, these ruins are ruins of hopes and homes and sometimes even health. I invite you to hold on to three things of encouragement. First, an encouragement to be present in the ruins. Nehemiah walked among the ruins, and we walk in those ruins as well. Find ways to see the ruins and the pain in new ways. Make space when you are a guest in someone else's story. Be that guest. Make space. As you hear stories, begin to also hear hopes. Let's work to nurture the hope that we see and help bring forth more hope in the days and weeks and months ahead. Recently, a Bridge of Hope alumni shared her story and reflected on when she and her two boys were in a domestic violence shelter. She said, "I was at the absolute bottom." Those are the ruins, the places of devastation that we walk with families in. And most of us as staff and board, we have also experienced places of ruin in our own lives. Who among us has not experienced struggle and dark days? Being present in the ruins sometimes means authentically naming our own ruins with each other in order to be fully present with the families we are walking with the neighboring volunteers that we are walking with. Families facing homelessness have known complex trauma, walking in the ruins through abuse, panic attacks, unsafe places to sleep, and so much more. And to create these safe spaces, we must first intentionally cultivate vulnerability, brave conversations that embody cultural humility and that demonstrate Christ's love. Making space here amidst the ruins is our work. Being present is how we do that work, being present in the ruins. My second encouragement is to build hope with a communal approach. Make space for the communal. The image of God is collective, not individual, says Kat Armas in her book, Abuelita Faith. And God has created us to be in community. Kat goes on to say, we need one another because no one person and or one group of people can fully bear all that is God's image. Instead, each culture, people, or group offers a glimpse of a different aspect of the full image of God. And look at Nehemiah. He wasn't building a wall for himself. He had a vision for the city, for all of the people. Recently, someone pointed out to me that the social capital video we use at Bridge of Hope focuses on an individualistic perspective of social capital and challenged us to consider what social capital might also look like from a communal perspective, a communal value lens. I have been giving that a lot of thought. At Bridge of Hope, we believe that the communal connection is a significant piece of the puzzle in ending family homelessness. Our mission is not just about individual Christians, but it's about the power of community and the power that community can have when they show up for a family facing homelessness. These aren't just words we talk about in our neighboring training, but it is embedded in our 4 core values and is the heart of our mission. Faith is to be practiced in community, lived out in community. And that's why communal values aren't just important for the health of families we serve, but also for each other, for us as staff and as board members. If you have bought into the deep myth of individualism in our country today, you do so at your own spiritual and physical peril. God's call throughout Scripture is not a me, myself, and I faith, but a faith lived out in the community of faith. And you might have seen this on social media. It seems to be all over the place these days, but a lack of community, or often called loneliness, is worse for our health than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Have you seen that on social media? It's everywhere. And it increases the risk of premature death by 25%. I did look it up. It's a real study. It's not just like a fake social media thing. Research by the Mayo Clinic shows people who have satisfying relationships with others are happier, better adjusted, experience fewer health problems, and live longer. They also have a reduced risk of depression and high blood pressure. It impacts our spiritual and physical well-being and emotional. So why does our society value individualism if it is actually detrimental to our health, to our very lives? You all are doing work that is stress-filled, carrying high levels of secondhand trauma as you walk with families facing the ruins. And that's not even taking into account the ruins you face in your own families, in the society that we walk and breathe and live in the systemic racism, in the systemic patriarchy, in socioeconomic pressures that are placed on all of us by our culture. So my encouragement to you is to build your own community. So now I'm not talking about the families you serve. You got that, right? I'm talking about you. Take care of yourself by building your own community of support, your own scaffolding of support. Your very life and health depend on creating community around yourself and encouraging the families that you serve to build their community. Begin to learn how to build community with neighboring volunteers as well. One of my joys this past year and a half has been a group of 6 women that I am friends with, and we were away together, first time ever on a vacation together, and one of the women had just shared something very, very deep and personal, and another woman said, hey, could we make a commitment together? And everybody's like, okay, what kind of commitment? Let's grow up and grow old together. And let's be intentional about it. And that has been a huge gift in my life these past 18 months. This simple agreement among us has been a bond, and it holds me fast when I feel I am walking in the ruins. One of my current challenges is walking with my husband, who is facing a lot of health challenges. And that bond of having a community that is continually asking me how I am doing is holding me fast. So build your community of support and help moms in Bridge of Hope understand and embrace their own need for community as well. And finally, leave space for God to work. Emily Towns is the past dean of Vanderbilt Divinity School. And she says that when she was ordained, her pastor told her, leave some work for the Lord. And she has worked to live that out every day since. This work is God's. We are called to be faithful to this work, but this is not ours alone to carry. And that is a relief, my friends. So what does it look like when we leave some work to the Lord? It can look like releasing some things that we absolutely cannot fix. It can also look like big surprises, like a call out of the blue to one of our Bridge of Hope locations who offering a donated condo to use for affordable housing. It can look like a neighboring family who moves into housing with her 3-year-old child within several days of coming into Bridge of Hope, for a Bridge of Hope location who has an average this past year of 100 days to housing. It can look like a Bridge of Hope family graduating. A mom who has come into Bridge of Hope facing eviction with her son with special needs. This is a mom who has not trusted anyone with her son with special needs. And that journey of being a single parent is challenging, but especially being a single parent with a special needs child. And so with no support system, there was no one to take care of the child when school is closed or the child is sick, until she met her neighboring volunteers. And those neighboring volunteers have now turned into a strong community of support who she trusts with her son. And that too is the Lord's work. So these 3 encouragements: be present in the ruins, build hope with a communal approach, and leave space for God to work. Pastor Andy ended his sermon that day back in 1986 with these words. In conclusion, I'm simply calling us to pray as Nehemiah did, to face and engage the ruins in people's lives as Nehemiah did, and to share our visions with the wider body as Nehemiah did. So, go forth, Bridge of Hope, with the vision to rebuild the ruins of homelessness, making space for affordable housing, whole family support, and space where all people have a community of support. Thank you for the work that you do.